Hello, everybody. Um, Happy Thursday. I took a COVID test yesterday and it was negative, and I think I have to confirm that I'm not going to be spreading anything. So, plan is I'm out today. I'm hoping to be back tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see how that all goes. Um, Today's agenda is to work our way into our second unit, talk about what social psychology is, sociocultural psychology more specifically, and then our notes for today is on group behavior. So notice the reading assignment for Monday is chapter 19, section 2. So I'm going to open up the notes if you want to follow along. They're posted today. So let's get into it. Sociocultural psychology. I kind of learned this frame as social psychology, and if we try to sum up what the focus is for this branch, social psychologists are studying the way individuals are influenced by the presence of groups. Groups are affected by individuals, and groups affect each other. So when we talked earlier in the week about culture and ethnicity and race and gender and some of those other things, that all falls within this frame of how we're influenced by other people. So what's kind of interesting about this unit is you get a real interesting grab bag of stuff. So if you haven't gotten into the unit folder yet, there is a reading guide in here. And if you just kind of scroll through the reading guide, we talk about groups kind of generally. We'll do that today. We get into ideas like conformity and obedience. We talk about things like aggression and altruism, like how we treat other people. Chapter 20 gets into how we think about some of these issues. So we talk about attitudes and cognitive dissonance and prejudice and discrimination. So there's a whole host of things. We'll end the unit on persuasion, and we'll talk about how cults use persuasion tactics to get members to stay in their group. So it's kind of a weird grab bag. So again, what do all of these topics have in common? We're thinking about the way that individual people, you and I, are influenced by groups around us, how groups can be affected by individuals, think of like a leader, and how groups can impact each other. So all of these things fall within those parameters. So let's get into it. What is a group? Group is a collection of people who have shared goals, a degree of interdependence, and some amount of communication. Interdependence means that what you do impacts or influences other people in your group, or vice versa. What they do influences or impacts you. So one of the things that I would have you do if we were in class is talk at your table about a group that you're a member of. So you can kind of pause me and think about that. But what are some groups that you're a member of? You're in a group in our classroom, right? We meet regularly. The things that happen in class influence you, good, bad, or otherwise. We have some amount of communication. We talk to each other. We interact, right? We have shared goals. We're trying to learn this stuff. So it could be like a classroom is a group. It could be people that you work with, right? Think about how those things could all connect. Could be a team that you're on. It could be any number of things, right? Two of the other terms that relate to groups are task functions and social functions. And these are things that are related to how groups do what they do. So it says task functions are activities directed towards getting a job done, towards completing a task. Social functions of a group are things that are connected to satisfying the emotional needs of members. So we could argue that what happens in our classroom could entail both task functions and social functions, right? Some of the stuff that we're doing is about completing assignments, getting ready for a test, earning a credit. And some of the things that we do are related to really making human connections and some of those social functions. So part of the reason that I'm doing some of the starter things at the beginning of class and having you do the trivia and whatever else is because that's a part of maintaining functional groups. You can think about other groups you're a member of and think about the different task functions and social functions. And I think, if I was there with you, we could come up with some examples, and this would make sense. How are groups held together is our second question. So we have two terms, norms and ideology. So norms are shared standards of behavior accepted by and expected from group members. And ideology are the principles, attitudes, and objectives for which a group stands. So the question I would have you talk about at your table is, how does this relate to groups like students at Burnsville High School? You're all members of our high school group. So what are the norms, the shared standards of behavior? What is it that you expect other people to do or not do when they're at school? Right? There are certain rules for how you're supposed to behave here. And my guess is that if you're with your peers somewhere else, or if you're at work, there are different rules, right? Different norms. The ideology would be the principles, attitudes, and objectives for which a group stands. So if you look over on the side of the room, I have the Blaze Matrix hanging up, and I think that would be the best example of kind of part of the ideology of Burnsville High School, right? These are the attitudes that we're supposed to be engaged in, right? Zest being everyone's favorite. So if you think again about making connections to other groups you're a member of, the more you can make this personal and connect these ideas and come up with examples, the more that these terms will start to make sense. So you might want to even pause and think about, if you're on a softball team, if you have a work group, if you have whatever group you're a part of, what are the different norms and what is the ideology of that group? Down below it says, in terms of commitment to a group, the more a person is required to sacrifice to become a member of the group, the more likely they will continue with it. So if it costs money to join a group, if there's hardship involved, meaning, you have to put in some effort or you have to do something that might take something out of you to be a part of the group, if there's some kind of initiation ritual to be in a group, you're more likely to stick with that group. When we get to the end of the unit and we're talking about cults, some of these ideas will then start to be more clear, because you have people that are engaged in pretty intense behaviors connected to these groups, and they hold on even though there's some pretty crazy things happening around them, right? Participation, active participation increases feelings of membership in a group. So this is one of the reasons that people at the high school say you should try to join some activities. You should become a part of something, because we know that the more that you're connected to people, the more participation you have, the more you feel like a part of a member of our group. So if we want you to be a member of the Burnsville High School community, then participating in different things will increase that feeling of membership. Two additional terms, we have social facilitation and social inhibition. So social facilitation is an increase in performance in front of a crowd. Social inhibition is the opposite, a decrease of performance in front of a crowd. So think about when you have to perform in some way, whether that's like from a stage, if you're singing for people or playing in a band, or you're performing in a theater group or something like that, or even giving a speech, anything where you're giving a performance. If the energy of the crowd makes your performance better, that would be social facilitation. If the presence of the crowd makes you more nervous and you kind of choke on that moment, that's more social inhibition. And the research says that whether you go one way or the other with the crowd kind of depends on what you're doing. If you're very skilled at something, if you have a lot of experience at something, the crowd can really propel you forward and your performance can be better. Think of Beyonce, right? She's a skilled performer. When the crowd is cheering for her, she probably does better, right? If it's something that I'm not real keen on and not very good at, let's say I have to give a speech in one of my classes and that stresses me out, it is more likely to be a social inhibition situation where the crowd, the people watching me is stressing me out. This is also connected to your feelings of being evaluated by others. If I feel like I'm being judged and not judged in a positive way, that's gonna have an impact on how I go one way or the other with this. Last question, how do groups make decisions? We have group polarization and group think. So group polarization is kind of a complicated idea. I'm going to suggest if you haven't read the section, read the section, because getting some context for this will help fill in the gaps. But the definition here is group discussion reinforces the majority's point of view and shifts group members' opinions to a more extreme position. So let's say you're in a room and you're talking about politics. What group polarization says is that the discussion is going to push people further to the right or the left if you understand that language. If you come in and you're kind of liberal or kind of conservative, talking about the issues is going to push you to more conservative or more liberal, especially if people are disagreeing with you. So polarized, like North Pole, South Pole, that's what polarized means, pushing you further to the extremes. So that's a thing that can come up in groups. And obviously group polarization would get in the way of making good decisions, right? If the goal is to try to get along and to come up with some kind of middle ground decision and people get pushed to the extremes, it makes it harder to make decisions. Think of our current Congress right now. We can hardly get Democrats and Republicans to agree on anything at this point. So, we're in a very polarized time. Groupthink is poor group decision-making that occurs as a result of a group emphasizing unity over critical thinking. And one of the examples they give in the book is the Challenger explosion, the space shuttle that happened in the 80s. And you can watch this video link to kind of see what was going on there. But essentially what's going on is the people that were involved in the space shuttle launch were emphasizing unity. They wanted to be a team, and they downplayed critical thinking, like, maybe there are problems with the shuttle. Maybe there are some things that we need to get fixed before we launch this thing. Nobody wanted to break up the unity by asking hard questions. And so some pretty serious flaws went past, and the thing exploded. You can see groupthink as another problematic part of groups and their decision-making process. All right, so here's how we would have ended, and to try to connect some dots. If you can come up with answers to these questions, then that would tell me that you're on the right track and these things are making sense. So think of a group that you're a member of. How functional is the group? Does it work? Do things get done? Are there challenges that members of the group face? If you have a work group or some other group that you're a part of, if you can connect back to some of the terms that we talked about today and see how they could fit into those questions, that would be the goal. That is it. If you have questions, you can email me. But for today, our focus is really just to try to connect to some of the big ideas in this section. Again, Monday's reading assignment is chapter 19, section 2. So if you don't have anything for me, I will see you hopefully tomorrow. Otherwise, we'll go from here. Have a good afternoon.